For decades, we've all heard about this thing called the rules-based order. It's basically the system of alliances and treaties that's kept things, well, relatively stable. But what happens when a major world leader stands up and says, "That's over"? Yeah, that's not just a disagreement. It's a sign that the world we thought we knew might be gone. So let's get into what this actually means.
And boom, there it is. That's the quote that's shaking things up. And look, this isn't from some pundit on TV or a journalist trying to get clicks. This is from the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, speaking at the Munich Security Conference, of all places. A single sentence that's like a seismic shockwave right through the foundation of the modern world.
Okay, so how on earth did we get here? How did we get to a point where the leader of Germany, one of America's oldest and closest allies, is basically declaring the end of an era? Well, the story of how this all fell apart, it actually starts at the one place that was created to hold it all together. You can't make this stuff up.
And that's the real kicker here. The whole point of the Munich Security Conference is to get leaders in a room to strengthen alliances, to talk things out. But this year, it became the stage for basically announcing that the most important partnership of the last 70 years is broken, maybe even shattered for good. And Merz, he didn't pull any punches. He flat out called it a deep divide.
Look, this didn't just happen out of the blue. The trust between the US and Europe has been crumbling for years. It's been death by 1,000 cuts. First, you had all the questions about whether the US was even still committed to NATO, the alliance that's been the bedrock of European security forever. Then, things got weird. We had the whole bizarre episode with former President Trump wanting to annex Greenland. Yes, Greenland, a part of Denmark. And then came the tariffs, hitting European economies where it hurts. Every single one of these was another crack in the foundation. But it's not just about politics or money. It's not just about trade disputes. According to Chancellor Merz, this whole divide, it goes way, way deeper. We're talking about a split that cuts right to the core of what they believe in, their fundamental values.
So what's at the heart of it? Merz pointed his finger directly at what he called a culture war, one being driven by the Make America Great Again movement in the States. And get this, it's not the first time this has come up in Munich. It's almost like a sequel. It's a direct echo of a really controversial speech from U.S. Vice-President JD Vance at the same conference just a year before. Vance basically put Europe on blast for its policies on things like free speech. It was a warning shot, and now it looks like that storm has finally arrived.
And this slide really breaks down the two opposing sides. On the one hand, you've got the classic European perspective. They believe in free trade, and they believe free speech has its limits, right? It's protected by their constitutions, but it can't infringe on basic human dignity. But then, on the other hand, you have what Merz describes as the MAGA movement's view. Forget free trade, let's have tariffs and protectionism, and a much more, let's say, absolute idea of free speech. We're talking about a fundamental clash of worldviews. They're just not speaking the same language anymore.
So, okay, if the old system is dead, and if Europe can't count on the United States anymore, what's the plan? What does Europe do now? Well, they're being forced to figure out a new path for themselves, and they have to do it like yesterday.
And right on cue, you have French President Emmanuel Macron stepping up. He was at the same conference, and he basically threw down the gauntlet. He said it's not enough for Europe to just be a big economic club anymore. Nope, it has to become a real geopolitical power in its own right, one that can stand up and defend its own interests, with or without anyone's help.
And that really is the huge question mark hanging over everything, isn't it? For decades, Europe has been able to sleep at night because it was protected by the American military, specifically by the U.S. nuclear umbrella provided through NATO. But if you take that guarantee away, what's left? What fills that massive void?
Well, the answer that's being whispered and now spoken out loud in the halls of power is something that honestly used to be completely unthinkable: a European nuclear deterrent. The idea here is for Europe to build its own joint nuclear strategy, completely independent from the United States, to have its own ultimate security guarantee.
And listen, this isn't just some academic idea being kicked around anymore. This is happening. In what was probably the biggest bombshell of his speech, Chancellor Merz confirmed that confidential talks are already underway. And between who? France, which has nuclear weapons, and Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe. This is a massive, massive step. It's a direct result of that trust in the U.S. just evaporating.
So, what does all this mean for the rest of us? Well, it basically throws the entire global chessboard into chaos. It feels like we're watching the old rulebook being torn up in real time, and we're stepping into a new era that's a lot more uncertain and maybe a lot more dangerous. And hey,
don't just take Europe's word for it. It's not a one-sided thing. Even before the conference kicked off, a key American voice, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, basically said the same thing. He acknowledged this new reality. So you've got leaders on both sides of the ocean agreeing the old way of doing things is over. The game has completely changed.
Which leaves us with the one giant unanswered question. If the old world order is really and truly gone, what's next? As these historic alliances break apart and new powers rise, who gets to write the new rules? Who has the power? Who has the vision? And frankly, who has the nerve to shape this brand new, uncertain world? That's what we're all about to find out.